The Atlas vampire was an unknown assailant who committed the unsolved vampire murder in Stockholm, Sweden. On May 4, 1932, a 31-year-old prostitute, Lili Lindström, was found murdered in her small apartment in the Atlas area of Stockholm near Sankt Eriksplan. She had been dead for 2 to 3 days before police broke into her apartment, and she had suffered blunt force trauma to her head. Lili was found completely naked and face down on her bed. According to reports, sexual activity had taken place, with a condom found to be protruding from her anus. The detectives noted that a gravy ladle was found at the scene, and on further inspection of the body, they realized her body had been drained of all of her blood. Police suspected the implement was used by the perpetrator to drink Lili's blood. Various clients fell under suspicion, but after a lengthy investigation, none were charged with her murder. The murder remains unsolved. The Babes in the Woods murders is a name which has been used in the media to refer to a child murder case in which the bodies of 2 brothers, Derek and David Dalton, also known as David and Derek Bousquet, were found concealed in woodland at Stanley Park in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. The Vancouver Police Department identified the brothers publicly on February 15, 2022. The remains of 2 male victims, murdered about 1947, were discovered in Stanley Park, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada on Wednesday, January 14, 1953. Police determined that a hatchet found at the crime scene, which was of a type commonly used by shingle weavers and lathers, had been used to kill the boys by striking them in the head. Their corpses had been arranged so that they were lying down in a straight line, with each boy's sawls facing the others, and then concealed with a woman's rain cape. The investigation was hampered when the medical examiner concluded that one victim was female. A DNA test conducted in 1998 proved that both victims were male and that they were brothers, and they were between the ages of 6 and 10 when they died. In 2018, detectives were planning on using consumer DNA databases such as Ancestry.com and 23andMe to research the identities of the victims. This investigation came to a close in 2022 when the children were identified via forensic genealogy as Derek, born February 27, 1940, and David Dalton, born June 24, 1941, the sons of Eileen Bousquet, who died in 1996. The investigation into their homicide is ongoing. The Lake Bodom murders is one of the most infamous unsolved homicide cases in Finnish criminal history. On June 5, 1960, at Bodom Lake in Espoo-Uusimaa, Mila Björklund and Anja Maki, both 15, along with Seppo Boiman, 18, were killed by stabbing and blunt force trauma to their heads while sleeping inside a tent. The 4th youth, Nils Gustafsson, then aged 18, was found outside the tent with broken facial bones and stab wounds. Despite extensive investigations, the perpetrator was never identified, and various theories on the killer's identity have been presented over the years. Gustafsson was unexpectedly arrested on suspicion of committing the murders in 2004, but he was found not guilty the following year. On Saturday, June 4, 1964, Finnish teenagers had decided to camp along the shore of Lake Bodom, near the city of Espoo's Oita Manor. Mila Ermeli Björklund and Anja Maki were both aged 15 at the time. Accompanying them were their boyfriends, Seppo Antero Boiman and Nils Wilhelm Gustafsson, both aged 18. Sometime between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. during the early morning hours of Sunday, June 5, 1960, Maki, Björklund, and Boiman were all stabbed and bludgeoned to death by an unknown assailant. Gustafsson, the only survivor of the massacre, had fractured facial bones that appeared to confirm his story of being a victim. He stated afterwards that he had seen a glimpse of an attacker clothed in black with bright red eyes coming for them. At about 6 a.m., a group of boys birdwatching some distance away had reportedly seen the tent collapsed and a blond man walking away from the site. The bodies of the victims were discovered at about 11 a.m. by a carpenter named Esko Oiva Johansson. He alerted the police, who arrived on the scene at noon. The killer had not injured the victims from inside the tent, but instead had attacked the occupants from outside with a knife and an unidentified blunt instrument, possibly a rock, through the sides of the tent. The murder weapons have never been located. The killer had taken several items which detectives found puzzling, including the keys to the victims' motorcycles, which themselves had been left behind. Gustafsson's shoes were partially hidden approximately 500 meters from the murder site. The police did not cordon off the site nor record the details of the scene, later seen as a major error, and almost immediately allowed a crowd of police officers and other people to trample around and disturb the evidence. The mistake was further exacerbated by calling in soldiers to assist with the search around the lake for the missing items, several of which were never found. Björklund, Gustafsson's girlfriend, was found undressed from the waist down and was lying on top of the tent and had suffered the most injuries out of all of the victims. She was stabbed multiple times after her death, whilst the other two teenagers were slain with less brutality. Gustafsson was also found lying on the top of the tent. Many local people suspected Carl Valdemar Gillström, a kiosk keeper from Oikta, who was known to have been hostile towards campers. Police found no hard evidence to link him to the actual murders. They were skeptical of supposed confessions he was said to have made because they considered him disturbed. He drowned in Lake Bodom in 1969, most likely by suicide. The people in the town knew Gillström was violent, cut down tents, threw rocks at people who came to his street, and some have later said that it was Gillström they saw coming back from the murder scene but were too afraid to call the police about him. The police never recovered DNA from Gillström. A book released in 2006 brings up the theory in detail. The book also claims that the police almost immediately ignored much more evidence that was previously unknown to the public because of language barriers, among other things. Most public suspicion focused on Hans Assmann, who lived several kilometers from the shore of Lake Bodom. A series of popular books promulgated a theory of Assmann committing the Bodom killings and other murders. It was not taken seriously by the police, as Assmann had an alibi for the night of the Bodom murders and was said to have been in Germany during the time of another murder. On the morning of June 6, 1960, however, he had shown up at a hospital in Helsinki with bloody clothes. In late March 2004, almost 44 years after the event, Gustafsson, not a suspect in the case as far as the public knew, was arrested. In early 2005, the Finnish National Bureau of Investigation declared the case was solved based on new forensic analysis. According to the prosecution's interpretation of the bloodstains, Gustafsson had been drunk and excluded from the tent when he attacked the other boy, getting his jaw broken in a fight which escalated into him committing 3 murders. The trial started on August 4, 2005. Gustafsson's defense lawyer argued that the murders were the work of one or more outsiders and that Gustafsson would have been incapable of killing 3 people, given the extent of his injuries. It had always been known that the shoes worn by the killer and hidden by him 500 yards away from the tent belonged to Gustafsson, who was found barefoot on top of the tent. Modern DNA analysis was significant for the prosecution as it showed that the 3 murdered victims' blood was on Gustafsson's shoes, but Gustafsson's was completely absent. The prosecution said it followed from the lack of Gustafsson's blood on the shoes, that his injuries had occurred at a different time to the attack on the murdered victims, and that the only explanation of this was that Gustafsson had committed the murders, then faked the theft of items by hiding them, further injured himself and then went back to the tent where, now barefoot, he pretended to be unconscious. The prosecution attempted to bolster their case by alleging an identification by 2 birdwatchers of Gustafsson as the tall blonde man at the scene on the crime, an assertion that he had been overheard making an incriminating remark, and also that a decade after the event he had boasted to a woman about his guilt. On October 7, 2005, Gustafsson was acquitted of all charges. The court explained the verdict as due to the prosecution evidence being inconclusive, failure to show Gustafsson had a motive appropriate to a crime of such extreme seriousness, and certainty about the facts now being impossible given the time that had elapsed. The state of Finland paid him €44,900 for the mental suffering caused by the long remand time, but he was refused permission to sue Finnish newspapers for defamation.